Hello there, welcome back to Mindful May. Today's project is this beautiful V-neck tiered green dress that I made from a top sheet that I found at a thrift store. I remember stumbling across this green top sheet with these birds and butterflies on it, and I thought, that's a little much, but I kept coming back to the thrift store and looking at it, and it took me several weeks to actually pick it up and buy it, and I'm so glad I did. Whenever I'm sewing something, I basically make a base plan. I try to map it all out, but as I'm going, a lot of things come up and I change my mind on things. I had planned to make it a V-neck with tiers and have it be sleeveless, but once I had finished the top bodice and the tiers, I realized it would look much better with sleeves. With that said, I would have done a couple steps differently with the lining on the inside. If I had known that I would have green fabric left over, I would have made my lining with that instead of the white scraps that I use. For this project, I started with the bodice with 4 rectangles that were 10 by 14 inches. I go in 2.5 inches. 3 inches from there, I pop in another mark that will be my strap. From the bottom of the rectangle, this will be where the armhole is, 4 inches from the bottom. And I'm just going to make a curved line from those 2 points. Then on the opposite side, 11 inches down, I'll pop a mark. This is how low I wanted my V-neck to go. And from my strap point down to the V-neck point, I will draw a straight line. And then cutting those out. I have my first top panel. So I'm going to do the same thing 4 times, 2 for the front, 2 for the back. And then creating my lining pieces. Again, I would not have used white if I had known that I would have green left over, but you live and you learn. I'm just going to cut out the identical pieces on my lining. So here's 1 done, and then I need 3 more. These are all of my bodice pieces done with the lining also cut out. And now I'm going to go about attaching them. So placing right sides of my lining and my good fabric together. I'm going to pin all the way around the top, leaving the bottom portion open to enable me to flip it inside out. And taking it to the machine, also a 1/4 inch away from the edge, all the way around. I will repeat this step for all 4 pieces, and then take my iron to it, flatten it all out. And now it's time to start attaching them. Starting with the left side of the bodice, I am going to open it up and sew together what would be underneath the armhole, pinning that in place, right sides together. And then the shoulder seam as well, pinning that into place. And then sewing a very simple line down each side. I've done this on both sides, and now it's time to attach in the center. So I will take my left panel and connect it to the right panel, right at the V, pinning here and sewing down. Repeating with the back portion. My measurements were a tad off here, which is not uncommon for me, honestly. So this top portion is all done. I decided that I wanted more of a V cut, so I just trimmed a little bit off of both sides kind of went up in a V formation into the center. I just thought it would fall a little nicer when the tiers were added. My next step is to create some bust gathering, which I thought would be a really nice effect. So I'm going in 3 inches from the center, popping a pin there, measuring 3 inches from that, and popping another pin. So this is just a 3-inch gather at the very center line of the bust on the bodice. So I'm going to sew a wide stitch over the lining and the good fabric. So I'm not doing a forward and back stitch on either side. And instead I'm going to pull that string to create a gather, which gives the bodice a more full effect and a more shaped effect, almost like a dart would create. Doing this step also helps me to differentiate the front of the dress from the back, since they are identical in their pattern. Starting to add the first tier, I'm going to do 7 inches in height. So I am marking that all along a folded piece of fabric. I love to cut out my tiers on a big folded piece of fabric just to make it easier to cut through a really long strip. And in the end, I had a 7-inch tier by 50 inches. Completing this first tier, I am facing them right sides together and pinning it in place, sewing it down, and then creating a wide stitch around what will be the top of my tier. And this is going to attach to the top bodice piece. So again, no forward and back stitch when we are making a gathering stitch, because we want that thread to pull through the fabric with ease. I'm sewing as close to the edge as I can, and then I'm going to pull the bobbin string, or the one that's on the back side, and gently push the fabric over the thread. And I will be gathering this until it's just about the width of my top bodice. Starting at the side seam, this is the seam right underneath the armpit. I love all my seams and lines to match, and then I'm going to sew all the way around. I'll take it to the machine and sew it all together. Sewing on any kind of ruffle or tier or ruched piece can be a little tricky. You're working with wrinkly fabric essentially, so you might have to manually maneuver some things around, but with a lot of practice you'll get there, and they're very forgiving, thankfully. Time to add my second tier. But first, trying it on, I felt like this could be a super cute shirt if I wanted to stop here, just make a tank top with one ruffle. But I decided to keep going with an 8 by 75 inch tier. And same thing here, you do a wide stitch along the top, gather that stitch until it's the same length as the first tier, sew them right sides together, and then you're done with tier 2. Honestly, I used to feel very intimidated by making tiers, but now I can't stop. And for tier 3, I'm doing 7 inches by 110. So you'll notice that every tier gets a little longer. This is necessary to create that ballooning effect, or of it widening out as it goes down. I made this dress so long ago, I don't remember where I got the measurements for the lengths of my tiers. I probably went with however long my sheet was. And now attaching my third tier, The only difference here is I'm going to create a rolled hem at the bottom. And I'm going to do this before I do my gathering stitch, or else it will be very difficult to sew. I'm doing the tiniest little rolled hem that I can, and I'm going to sew a line all the way around. And then I will do my gathering stitch, ruffle it all in until it's the length of the previous tier, throw it up right sides together, and sew it on. All 3 tiers are done, and I thought the dress would be done until I realized that I really did want sleeves. And I had fabric left over, so I'm just gonna see what I can make. On a folded piece of fabric, I'm lining up the armhole. And at the top of the fold, though it's not in the shot, it's sitting right at the top of the shoulder. I'm just going to trace this line down. It'll taper off a little bit at the armpit, and then I'll just cut a straight line across. For my measurement of length, I went with 19 inches. So it's going to hit me right at the middle of my forearm, and cut this sleeve out. And cutting the same thing out on another folded piece of fabric, place my sleeve on top to create a template, and cut out the exact same panel. Next up, I am measuring my forearm at about 9 inches comfortably. I'm going to add an inch for seam allowance, so cutting out 10 inches here. So this is for my wrist cuff. I'm going to want it 3 inches high and 10 inches wide. And I will be cutting out 2 identical pieces. Next, to attach the sleeve, I'm going to fold it right sides together and sew down the underside of the sleeve. Very simple, just one straight line. With that sewn together, I'm going to put it through the arm's eye of my dress. I like to turn my garment inside out and place the sleeve right side out within the hole and pin it all around. Creating armholes and sleeves seems really intimidating, but again, the more you do it, the more comfortable you get and the more you understand how it all gets attached. Pinning it equally all around, and I'll sew it on. Here's the first sleeve attached, and the second. Next, moving on to adding the cuff at the bottom of the sleeve. I'm going to create a wide stitch around to pull in and ruche my sleeve. I'm going to take my cuff, sew them right sides together to give me a little circle. I'm going to ruche this until it's the same width as my wrist cuff. That's about the same length. I'm going to turn my dress sleeve inside out, and I'm actually facing the right side of the cuff to the wrong side of the sleeve. It's a little counterintuitive, but it will make sense later. Pin this in place all the way around. And sew on the cuff. Here it is with the dress right side out. I'll pull the cuff through. So you're looking at the wrong side of the cuff, but now we're gonna roll it to the good side of the sleeve, hiding the bad side of the fabric and folding our cuff over that seam that we just sewed. I'm going to pin that in place. There's no real technique to this, I'm not going to lie. and then you sew it on. I sewed it as close to the edge of the cuff as I could. And here it is. Both sides are done and the dress is done. Thanks so much for tuning in and for clicking on this video. I always appreciate it. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up and then subscribe to my channel for some more videos, and I'll see you next time. Cheers!